All right, guys, welcome to Fungo Talk. I'm your host, Matt Smith, and we got co-host Matt Murata. We got Kevin Mulvey, head coach of Villanova University. What's going on, Kev?
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
How you been? How was your Mother's Day weekend?
Mother's Day was good. I got up with the two kids in the morning, let the wife sleep in, cooked her some breakfast. Went a long way. I was 2 hours out of the doghouse for doing that.
What about you, Murata? Anything special? I know you're not married, Murata, but hey, I know you got a sugar mama there that you got to take care of. So, was there any
It was special. I think this is the first Mother's Day I was able to celebrate with my mom. It usually runs into either the conference semifinals or conference championships. So she was super excited. I think this is a little bit of normalcy for some college coaches and some baseball guys.
That's funny. That's good. I got lucky. I was up at 6:30 in the morning. I took my father-in-law out for golf because he just retired. So we snuck out. We snuck out early, got 18 in, and I was back by like 12:30. The wife didn't even know what happened, so it was perfect.
Good move.
Oh, yeah. All right. So you know what? I was doing some research. 9-6 record. You took one from Arizona State. You swept Bucknell. I mean, it's tough. It had to end, but to leave that on a positive note, I mean, you got to feel pretty good. And what's that message to your guys, coming back for next season?
Well, I mean, we've been building towards this moment for a long time. And we feel very, very good about the group of guys that we have in here. They did a tremendous job this year of coming together, believing in themselves and believing in one another. It all starts with culture. You'll hear culture from every head coach, that you talk to in any sport at Division I level. It's all about building a good culture, having everybody buy into your culture, pulling in the same direction. And this group of guys that we had this year, they all loved each other. They loved being around each other. They had a lot of fun with one another. And it was a joy for me, to be around them. Any good team, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, any sport, any good team, you have to have good players and good coaches. And luckily for me, we had really good players and really good coaches. My assistants, Jabin Weaver and Eddie Brown, did a phenomenal job, both, between the lines and off the field. Our weight staff did an unbelievable job with the freshmen, bringing them up to speed. I don't know how much you guys have dealt with, freshman weight room tactics and all that, but when you take kids from being in high school where they have minimal knowledge in the weight room, minimal work ethic in the weight room, and then all of a sudden, they're on a Division I baseball team with 22-year-olds that are almost fully developed, there's some growing pains in there. And our strength and conditioning staff did a phenomenal job bringing them up to speed very quickly. And, it's a shame that the season got cut short because I was looking forward to seeing, what this team could do and what they were capable of. But it was off to a good start, and these guys are really hungry and they want to get back. They want to get back together. They want to get back on the field, and I can't wait either.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you got quite the resume. I mean, you played at Nova, you played in the Cape, you've thrown a no-hitter, at Nova, and, second round draft pick. I guess my question before we get to these kids' questions is, you've had so much success in your career. How important was it for you to come back home to where it all started at Villanova and build that strong foundation? And what were some of the challenges to kind of get that culture and foundation going?
Well, I've been very fortunate and very blessed in my baseball career, both as a player and now as a coach as well. A lot of things, happened in my favor, and it's kind of luck. I look at it as I'm a very lucky person. A lot of things went well for me. I'm blessed and I'm very grateful for all those things. But coming back to Villanova is really important to me because, all those great things that I got to be a part of in professional baseball, making it to the major leagues was a childhood dream that was achieved. But, to be honest, if God said, hey, Kevin, you could either go back to the big leagues or you could go back to Villanova and play out your career there, I would certainly go back to Villanova and play out my career there.
Awesome.
There's nothing quite like the freedom of college. You never really experienced it before college, and you never really experienced it after college. Those years that you're at college with your buddies, going to school, playing baseball, I mean, there's really no worry or concern in your mind about anything other than having fun and playing the game that you love. And for me, being able to come back and be a part of that for the players that are here now and in the near to, distant future, hopefully, is a godsend for me.
That's awesome. And Murata, you had some of the same path as Kev. I mean, played at Stack, and then you also went back to Stack. And how was that transition from player to coach?
Yeah, I think, like Kev's saying, there's something special when you go back to your alma mater and, you help that program win. I think, I've coached at other schools and that one year going back to, where it all started and, the weight room that you were in at 6 a.m. And, like Kev's saying, I think the biggest thing with college is that's the best time for a student athlete to really focus on what he wants. There's not as many distractions. Obviously, he's got to keep up with his education, but, he's not really working. Baseball is more of his full-time job. So, I love that. I think just like Kev said, he's had good teams, but, the culture is everything. So, anyone who's followed Villanova and has followed Kev, is obviously very excited for what he's going to do there. And, I think the hardest part, Kev, is, when you get a job like that, people think it's instantaneous. They don't understand that you could be acquiring someone else's recruiting class. So, Kev, could you talk a little bit about, what that's like to be a head coach, get that job, and, what that timetable looks like to really build your program? Because I think too many times than not, people think it's a very easy process.
Yeah, so that's a great point and a great question. So we start recruiting kids, at an early age in high school, sometimes freshman year, most times sophomore year. Sophomore and junior year is kind of our sweet spot. Their sophomore summer is when we start to look at them, and then, in the fall, their junior year, we'll take another look. And, if we like what we see and we like what we hear, and what I mean by what we hear is you have to do a lot of background work on players and their families. You really need to get a good feel for what they're all about, because there's a lot on the line with you bringing in a kid and his family into the program. They're going to represent that program in every way, in every action that they take, both in the classroom, on the field, in the weight room, on their social media, when they go out. Everything that they do, it comes back to both the head coach and the program and the university. So what we like to do is we like to talk and gather information from anyone. Personally, I like to talk to the high school coach a little bit more than the travel coach, right? And the reason for that is because the high school coach is not financially invested in the future of that player. That high school coach loves the kid, wants nothing but success for the kid, but there's no real financial investment from the high school coach to that player. He's gonna more likely than not give you a more honest opinion on that player, rather than a travel coach that may or may not be paid to place that kid and to help that kid under the promise of, I'm going to get you to play into college, right? So we take that one step further, and then, we want to see their transcripts, right? I want to look at that transcript, and I want to see, okay, where was this kid's worst grade? What class was this worst grade in? All right, it was in English. How do we get in touch with that English teacher to see how Billy and Billy's parents handled him getting that C in English? Were they gracious about it? Did they handle it with class? Or did it get sideways, and did they try to get that teacher fired, and was it a big deal like that? So we want to find any red flags that we can. And if we don't find any red flags, like I said, then we want to move a little bit quicker, where it's sophomore year or junior year. We want to get on that. We want to get on that kid and make a move on him and his family.
That's a great question Maddie brought up. And that brings us to, this is one of our questions. It's not the first question, but now that we're touching on like high school and showcase, I want to ask this one first. What do you value most? High school stats, perfect game metrics, or showcase team stats? And the reason being, there's a lot more pressure during high school varsity to win rather than, perfect game or showcase teams where it's more individual based and it's more about just worrying about myself rather than the team and the pressure, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm going to add on to this question is, when you look at these kids, do you look at the bigger picture of the competition that they're playing against? Because, I guess you could see on both sides, right? High school, sometimes the stats could be juiced. You play a certain team and it's like stat day, right? Do you guys look at the big game, where if it was Bosco versus Bergen or Bosco Joes rather than, Bosco versus, maybe a novice team? And also on a showcase, do you guys look at that of who they're playing?
Yeah, so first, Maddie, I didn't answer your full question. I just got into one thing, so we can come back to that after this. But I think what you're asking for in this question is, do I take into consideration one thing more than another when looking? And I don't think there's some special recipe in order to find a bulletproof answer to, whether this kid's going to project or not. For me personally, I kind of call it the 90-mile-an-hour rule, right? You have to either throw 90 miles an hour, you have to be able to hit against 90 miles an hour, or you have to have an exit velo of 90 miles an hour. And we'll start from there, right? How many kids at a sophomore year level are going to be able to do that? What percentage would you say? Maybe 10% of all sophomore high school baseball players can do that, right? So you have to project that, right? It can't be the end all. Oh, if this kid doesn't hit at 90 or then we can't have him. No, you have to project and say to yourself, okay, what does this kid show the ability to eventually get to that? Does this kid show me the ability to eventually hit 90, to eventually throw 90, and et cetera? And there's a lot that goes into that. But as far as high school stats, it definitely has to be factored in, right? I'm not going to recruit a kid that hits 100 in high school. That wouldn't be too smart, right? But I also am not going to look at a kid that hits 600 and say, well, we have to have this kid because he hit 600 in high school. There's a lot of factors that go into that. It's not like other sports where, track and field or swimming, the numbers are the numbers, right? It doesn't matter. There's no influence on it. You're just going off the numbers. In baseball, you have to take a deeper dive into those numbers, like you were saying. What's the competition level? What conference is he playing in? Are the kids that he's facing on the mound, are they comparable to the kids that he's going to face in college? Or are they comparable to, a JV level somewhere else?
Yeah, no, you hit that one on the head. So, no, I'll let you get back to Maddie's question. Sorry about interrupting that.
Yeah, so Maddie, give me that question again, because I know I started to answer it, but I was getting
No, honestly, you did a great job with it. I really wanted you to show how much extra work it is. People think you could just go in as a head coach. Now you're getting kids that you didn't recruit. So you just touching on all the extra work where you're going to start sophomore, junior year. Could you give us a better understanding of, how long it really takes to get acclimated as a head coach when it comes to, recruiting as early as you do and really getting more of your class and your assistant's class in there instead of inheriting a class?
Right. So right off the bat, you're going to come in and you're going to try to set your standards, whether that's, attention to detail, accountability, what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed. And, that takes a little bit of time because you got to understand that there's kids in your program that are used to the old regime and the old set of standards, right? So there's going to be a little bit of pushback there right away on that. There's going to be some guys that are like, well, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't what I want, so then you have to handle that. And, you're bringing in your first class, depending on when you started recruiting, you're going to bring in your first class multiple years down the road, right? You're not going to have all your guys that you brought in until 3 to 4 years down the road, depending on what your university, permits you to do as far as cutting kids and getting rid of kids. Where I'm from at Villanova, we're not about cutting kids. We're not about getting rid of kids. There's direct influence there from the university saying like, hey, we're not about bringing kids in and cutting them and getting rid of them. That's not what we're about. So understanding that moving forward, you have to have that in the back of your mind. Like, yes, I do need to set my own standards. I do need to change the culture here. There needs to be attention to detail and accountability, but there also has to be a little bit of dance and a little bit of give and take that, hey, there's some kids on the back end here that are going to be here for a year or two that might not be subscribing to what it is that you're talking about. And luckily for us in our program, we didn't have many kids like that. I'm sure there were players that weren't playing that didn't appreciate all the changes that I made. But luckily for me, you know, the way that they were raised, you know, they kind of hunkered down and they dealt with it in a professional way. And for that, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful because think about how many players there are on a college roster. You know, 35 guys. How many people play on the field at once? 9. Okay? 9 guys are playing. And on a weekend series, how many pitchers get in the game on average? What would you guys say?
I would say weekend series. What do you go, 3-game?
Yeah, 3-game series on the weekend.
Maybe
7.
about 10, 9.
I would say anywhere from 7 to 10, right? And let's say you start 2 other guys in the field than you started on Friday. 11 plus 10 is what? 21. 21 guys. 21 guys out of 35, okay? 21 guys out of 35. So do the math there. How many guys are there that are not getting in there that are putting in just as much work as the other guys? They're going to the weight room. They're hitting on their own. They're running. They're doing everything, right? And they're not getting that opportunity. How many of those guys is it very easy for them to say, you know what? I don't like this guy. I don't like what he's about. I'm going to go tell my parents, you know, I want to transfer, you know, and then the parents are going to say to themselves, well, I don't know about transferring, you know, you're at a school where you're going to get a really good degree, you know, let's stick it out there a little bit. And then you end up with some guys that might not be that happy. So half of your job as a head coach at a Division I program is roster management and making sure that guys understand, you know, it's for the greater good of the team. You have to have a team first mentality from top to bottom. Every guy on your roster has to be bought in to the team first. He has to be a team first guy. And I don't know if you were watching the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. Did you guys watch that last night?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so there was a part last night that I saw that I was like, whoa, I can't believe that happened. And it was Scottie Pippen when Michael Jordan left, you know, at the end of the game. Phil Jackson designed a play for Tony Kukoc to take the last shot. And Scottie Pippen said, I'm not going out on the court. He said, I'm not going out there. I'm going to sit on the bench. Now, you talk about great culture, right? You saw what happened. Did Phil Jackson even really get involved with that? No, the story that got told was that Bill Cartwright in the locker room got up in front of everybody and addressed the situation in tears, saying that he can't believe that Scottie Pippen quit on the team like that. And they all said, him, Steve Kerr, everybody said that from that moment on, we were tighter as a group because of that. So if there's moments like that, there's going to be growing pains, right? It's not going to be perfect. Everybody complains. It's human nature. Everybody gets upset. It's human nature. But as long as everybody knows, in order for us to be the best team we can be, everyone has to be bought in on the team first. It's all about the team, not about me. And when that happens, when guys get off track a little bit and they start to think about, you know, me and someone has to bring them back in. And the good teams have players that bring them back in, right? I would say the great teams. Teams that struggle, it becomes a little bit of a push and pull between the head coach, and then you have players that are trying to say one thing and players are saying another and the coach is saying another, and then it turns into a disaster. So you really, really, really have to do a great job as a head coach, making sure that you're bringing in guys that are going to buy into the team first mentality, both before they get there and more importantly, when they get there.
Love it.
That is gold right there. So, I mean, to be honest, that takes me to my next question. I mean, you talk about buying into this culture and having the right guys. When you recruit your guys, and I know me and Maddie have been there as well previously when we coached, do you look at, I mean, because there's alphas, there's role guys, right? There's so many pieces to a team. I mean, when you recruit, are those things that you take into consideration? Like, we can't take on too many alphas because it could kind of almost, contradict that where we want to be down the road?
Well, a lot of that comes from communication with their coaches. I'll always refer back to what their coaches and their teachers and the people around them have to say about them. There might be a situation where, we like one kid, and I'm going to talk to another kid on his team and ask him, what does he say when things are bad? How does he act? How does he treat his teammates? Try, to build that puzzle to the best of our abilities so that it's as complete a picture as can possibly be. There's not too often that you're going to have a puzzle completed on a kid and every single little thing. But, the more pieces you can put together, the better picture that you get about that kid and about his family. I don't necessarily think, I'm scared of bringing in too many alphas, because I think that the more guys that you have that want to be high achievers and at the top of their game, I think the better. It's my job to make sure that the culture and the team is always at the forefront of everyone's mind. But, I don't know if you guys have brothers, if you grew up with brothers, but, brothers fight to the death. Like, they fight to the death. But at the end of the day, they're still a family and they still love each other. And when push comes to shove, if there's ever a bad situation that they need help, the first person that's going to help them is their brother.
I got two brothers, so you nailed it right there. I still got the battle scars to show it, but I love my brothers. I guess I got one more question to add on to that before I get to the next one. Have you ever had to sit a kid down and said, hey, we're going to bring you in. There's no guarantee, but you're going to have to compete if you want a spot. Sometimes these kids like to hear, do I get the job right away, right? Rather than you got to compete for it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever promised a kid playing time before. When we recruit a kid, we recruit them with the ability to compete for a spot. And I tell them to do their own homework. It's not too difficult for someone to see the picture of what's going on within my program. You can look at our roster, you can look at our stats, you can look at, our recruiting class on Perfect Game. You can look at it on Prep Report, whatever. You can tell and see, where we're at, where our holes are, where we need help, and where we're solid. So I always tell them, hey, you should be doing your homework and you should be looking at all these schools so that you have a better picture and what you're getting yourself into. Am I going to a school where, there's going to be 6 shortstops ahead of me that I have to compete with in order to play? Or am I going to a school where they have a senior shortstop that's going to be out, they have a junior shortstop that's waiting to play, and I'm the shortstop that they brought in this class? Those two scenarios are drastically different, and they have a better idea of, what they're getting themselves into. But I've never said, hey, you're coming in, you're starting. Hey, you're coming in, you're a Friday night guy. I'll tell them, hey, you have a chance to compete to be a weekend starter. Hey, you have a chance and an opportunity to win a spot to play right away. But it puts you as the head coach in a bad spot, promising playing time and promising roles before, you go through fall practice, you go through some games. It's a tough spot to put yourself in by talking about what will happen.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And plus, I think it shows a lot about the character of a kid to come in and compete and not just, have it on a platter waiting for him. I think it goes back to the lines then, right? I think all those alphas in the mix wanting to compete, I think it's going to raise everyone's level of play. So I couldn't agree more with you there. I guess the next question is, what's the biggest difference? And I guess from your experience, pitching in college and pitching in the pros, and did you learn anything different while being in the pros? As I guess in a mental and, teaching standpoint.
I learned a lot from both college and professional baseball. I would say that, the difference between college and professional baseball, and this is going to sound cliche, is that in pro ball, you have a lot more professionals, right? And I don't mean by trade simply because you're getting paid, you're called a professional. I mean consistent approach, how much work you put in, your habits, all those things. So in college, you know, how many guys on your team are really, you know, dedicated to their craft of doing everything they can in order to be the best player that they can be every minute of every day? And then you go to pro ball, how many guys are dedicated to being the best player that they can be by doing the right thing every minute of every day? I mean, there's a lot more of that at the pro level than there is in college, you know, let's be honest. And then once you get there and you start, you know, to get involved with those types of professional players doing all those things, you start to elevate yourself and see, okay, I really need to do all these things. I need to do A, B, and C, and I need to get rid of, you know, E, F, G. And when you start doing those things, you learn a lot more about yourself. You learn a lot more about, you know, what works and what doesn't. You know, another thing that's big for me is that when you're recruiting a kid to college, you know, you really have to make sure that they understand that the onus is on them. You know, I don't have a secret book of how to make you a professional baseball player. I don't have a secret book that's going to make you a all first team Big East player. You know, it's up to you to put all that work in. It's up to you to learn. The best advice that I was ever given was from Ricky Bonas. Ricky Bonas is the bullpen coach of the New York Mets. When I went to the Mets, he was my first coach in Binghamton. And he said, you know, I want you to understand that you're the cook, okay? You're the cook. I'm going to give you some recipes. I'm going to give you some ingredients, but you're the cook. You have to pick and choose what ingredients and what recipe you use to cook your stew, okay? And he said, the reason why I'm telling you that is because you've probably had about 12 pitching coaches in your life. If you try to do every single thing that all 12 of those pitching coaches taught you and talked about, you're going to spoil the stew. You can't do all those things at once. It just won't work. So you have to pick and choose what works for you, right? You can't try to please everybody. Some things are going to work and some things aren't going to work. So as long as you can understand that every single individual pitcher is different and every single individual hitter is different, there's not one thing that's going to work. There's not one drill or one approach that is going to work. Everything has to be catered towards the individual. And it has to be a little bit of a give and take between that coach and that player, right? It can't be, I'm trying to mold these machines and everybody's going to do the same thing. What works for you might not work for me. What works for him might not work for this other guy. So that's why you really have to be hands-on with each guy and make sure that they know, like, hey, we're in this together. This isn't you do what I say. This is, hey, let's get this done together and make sure that you are doing everything that you can in order to become the best player that you can be. And that's what I learned the most in pro ball compared to college is like, you know, it does, like, nothing's given to you. Nothing's going to be handed to you. Anything that you want, you have to go get it. And in order to get it, you have to do as many possible things right in order to get there. And even when you do that, you might not be lucky enough to get the opportunity. There's plenty of guys that played in the minor leagues that outworked me, were stronger than me, threw harder than me. I was just blessed and I got lucky to be in the right place at the right time. You know, baseball's not an easy game. It's the most difficult game there is. That's also probably why it's the best game to play.
Couldn't agree more with you. And that quote was awesome with the stew and stuff like that. It makes so much sense. I'm a big fan of Ron Washington, and I liked what he said about his philosophy of, you know, I'm just the mechanic. When you guys feel like things are breaking down, you could come and talk to me. And that's the way I like to do teaching with my guys too. With these little leaguers, it's kind of like, you know, everyone's different. Everyone's body's different, you know, your strengths, your weaknesses. And when you feel things are getting off the tracks, that's where I'm there to kind of help you and stuff. But I couldn't agree more, you know, with what you said with the stew and stuff. Maddie, what did you think of that? That was awesome.
I think it's awesome. I think, you know, there's a reason Kev is where he is, and, you know, the best coaches in the world understand that, you know, each animal is different. You know, you can't just cookie cut, you know, a certain athlete or tell them to do this drill. You know, what Kev is doing is or what he was talking about was his coach more or less, building his routine for him. I see it a lot with younger guys. I'm sure coach the same thing. The more things that you give them, the more things that are in their head or their database that they can go back to, so sometimes that's a bad thing too. If you're on the mound and you're thinking about, multiple mechanical things, you're done. So I think from a mentality side, as a pitcher, I think you need to just trust your routine, trust your work, and, make sure you're staying on top of it. And, once you get into the game, you got to trust that you're as prepared as possible. If you're thinking about mechanics, on the mound, in the box, it's just not really going to happen. So, I love that that's the advice that he got. And it's so true. Why am I going to change something on a guy that could affect now his slider or his depth or something different? So, I think these guys that want to change instead of, forcing that pitcher to understand what works for him versus somebody else, I think is huge. So, I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And since we're talking about pitching, let's get to the next question for you. How important is the right workout regimen as well as a long toss program? And can you expand on that from your personal experience? Because I know, when you were growing up, I'm sure the weight room scene was different than what it is today.
Yeah, so right off the bat, you talk about the weight room, and I brought that up in the introduction, how great our strength and conditioning staff is that, today more so than when I came through high school and went into college, these kids, they understand how important the weight room is. They know that they have to get the most out of their bodies. And, let's be honest, there's a lot of money involved in high school travel baseball and, high school training and all that stuff. So, the best high school travel ball coaches and high school baseball trainers are getting these kids involved early so that they can squeeze the most juice out of that lemon, so that these kids can see, like, hey, when I do these things, I throw harder. When I do these things, I hit the ball harder. So they've come a lot further along nowadays than back when I was in college. Kids do really subscribe to the weight room and, the band work and, things like that. But yeah, no, it's extremely important, finding a routine that fits you personally, as an individual is crucial to your development. For me, long toss was huge for me. I loved long tossing. I tried to throw the ball as long and as far as I possibly could. And I was fortunate enough to go to the Cape Cod League as a freshman and then again as a sophomore. And on back-to-back years, I had guys that were throwing, 98 to 100 miles an hour. I don't know how many people that are watching this will know the name Craig Hanson.
Oh, yeah.
Craig Hanson was a closer from St. John's, and he was on my team in the Cape. And Craig was, he probably still is, about 6'7", and long levers. And him and I would have long toss competitions probably 3 times a week to see who could throw the ball over the scoreboard in right center in Harwich. That was where we played. And then the next year, Tim Lincecum was on my team, and we would do the same thing. We would
nice
with each other to see who could throw the ball further. And after those, 2 summers, I went from throwing 90 to 92 to, 94 to 96 because of that, in my opinion. And you mix in the weight training and you mix in putting mass on your body and all that stuff. But, for me, long toss worked. I loved long tossing. I loved building arm strength that way. And I think that it is a tool. It's not the only tool, but it is a tool that people can use. Some guys that I played with hated long toss and refused to do it. And they still threw 95 miles an hour in a big league. So it's not the end all be all by any means. But again, back to, what I said earlier is that you take what works for you and you throw out what doesn't.
You know what? It just keeps coming back to me when you say, and if kids are listening to this, you just have to identify what works for you. Like you said, you don't have to do this or do that to throw 95 or hit home runs. you just, as an individual, I think you got to figure that out. So I
And
love that you keep saying that.
I do want to make sure that, any kids that are listening to this and any parents that are listening to this, if you do have a coach or multiple coaches that, have had some experience and have a plan in place for your son to follow or for yourself to follow, don't write it off and say to yourself, this doesn't work for me. You're not going to find out whether something works for you until later on in your career. So don't tell a coach, when you're 12 years old, like, I don't want to do that drill. It doesn't work for me. I don't want a long toss. It doesn't work for me. You're not going to know your body until you're fully developed. So be open-minded, take coach's advice and listen and do the things that they want you to do, because they have experience and all they want is success for you. They're not telling you to do these drills because they think it's funny, watching you do it. They want you to succeed. That's what coaching is.
Yeah. No, you hit that on the head too, because when you train guys, these kids, they want is this going to, in a week, or is this going to happen? I mean, This is a long-term investment game. And I think that's what kids need to realize. It's not an overnight thing. When kids come for lessons, he's not hitting a baseball. If I take 2 lessons, is he going to be like Derek Jeter or something? So I don't think people understand that this is like, it's a marriage and it's long-term. And guess what? There is no, like you said, there's no secret to success. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. You look at so many people that are trying to make it to the bigs that don't. So, I mean, like you said, it's just you roll the dice and, whatever happens, happens. But that was great. I have one more question, and then I'm going to let Maddie do his Moneyball question. He's got one funny question, one serious one. What age would you say you really fell in love with the game and became passionate about it? And did you play multiple sports as a kid?
I think that I was married to sports at like 4 years old. I think that I fell in love with all competition at 4 years old. Any type of competition, I loved it, especially if there was a ball involved or a bat, whatever there was involved in sports, I wanted to do it. I grew up and we would just find ways to play football, whether it was, in the backyard, 2-hand touch or tackle with whoever was there. Baseball, is a little bit more difficult to play a full 9 versus 9 game every day. However, we like to play, what we called fast pitch. And what it was either 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, where we found a wall and we would make a strike zone on the wall, and we would have either a tennis ball or a racquetball, and we would try to get each other out. And, a ground ball past the pitcher was a single, a ball in the air past the pitcher was a double, a ball past the outfielder or over the fence was a home run. And we would play 3 outs, and we would play, every day as long as we could throughout every single summer. When I didn't have anybody to play with, I was throwing the ball as hard as I could against the steps at my grandparents' house. Looking back, luckily for me, there was only 3 steps, okay? And if I threw it higher than the 3 steps, the ball would hit the screen door. And that meant that Grandpa would come out and yell at me to take the ball away. So I learned how to keep the ball down by throwing at those 3 steps at my grandparents' house. But I certainly think that being a multiple sport athlete is beneficial, right? And the reason why I say that is because at an early age, both academically and athletically, you're learning all of these different disciplines, right? When you're in grade school, when you're in high school, do they specialize in math only? Or is there a school that, you go to and you only take math from 4th grade until 12th grade? Not that I know of. You're learning everything. You're learning history, English, math, science. You're learning all those things so that you could be the most well-rounded intellectual that you can be. Well, the same thing for athletics rings true. You're learning how to be a better athlete, right? Your body's growing. You're learning agility. You're learning all these different athletic disciplines if you play more sports than just one. So in my opinion, I would love for every kid to be able to play multiple sports and become the best athlete that they can be by playing those multiple sports. That's not to say that it's okay to play just one sport. If that's what you want to do, then that's fine. You can do that. But I really get upset when there are, travel coaches or high school coaches that say, hey, you need to specialize in baseball. You need to play in the summer on my travel team. You need to play in the fall on my fall team. You need to take lessons with me in the winter. And then you need to be on my school team and summer team. And you kind of monopolize a kid's time there. And the parent might be thinking, well, geez, this is his best sport here. I don't want to hinder his chances of playing, so I might as well make sure that he does all these things that coach wants. And now all of a sudden, that kid's not playing another sport and he's not getting to become the best athlete that he can be, simply, in my opinion, because of some greed by some coaches. So if it was up to me, I would almost make it a rule that, hey, before age 15, you have to play a full season of, 3 or 4 sports.
I couldn't agree more. Growing up, I was a football, basketball, wrestled, baseball. The only time I really touched a baseball when it wasn't spring, summer, was maybe in the winter. I would still do a lesson here and there to stay sharp. But for the most part, it was all sports. And I think it only contributed to the athleticism that I have. And to be honest, the mental too. I mean, I thought football was a huge one for me. And so was wrestling. I mean, even basketball, I guess you could say, from a team aspect, you had to pass the ball. You had to learn how to, do things like that. And I loved it. I tell kids the same thing. I think it's important to play multiple sports. I don't knock a kid for wanting to be the best at one thing, but you're so young. I think you shouldn't just put all your apples in that one basket. But, hey, I'm all in. I want to be a professional baseball. Because you know what? You only get one shot at life, and you want to make as much memories as possible. The game's not guaranteed. That's why I love this show. I just love getting this feedback from all these coaches. And I've been lucky to build relationships with guys. And I think everything that every coach has said on here has just been spot on with it. So, that was awesome.
There's a little bit of risk, too, involved with specializing in baseball as a youth athlete. Throwing a baseball is not a natural motion, right? And it's my belief that you've only been given a certain amount of throws in that arm until it breaks down. So if you're not given a time, to rest and recover from throwing overhand, you run the risk of arm injury. And then the other side is you run the risk of burning the kid out too. If you got him playing in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, and then in the spring, I don't really think kids are wired to be professional baseball players at a young age. That if that comes, great, congrats, you made it. But at a young age, I mean, they're still kids. Let them be kids.
Yeah. Maddie, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about that. I think, too many people say, okay, hey, I want to play in the major leagues. Let me play this game all year round. But, if I'm a righty, if I'm a righty thrower, righty hitter, how much overwork is going to happen on that side. And I think symmetry is everything. So everything that Kev's saying, I mean, you really can't understand unless, you've played football. You went to a football practice where you're going to sprint, you're going to cut, you're going to jump, and your body's going to be able to react. So I think, with these younger athletes, playing pickup basketball and being able to sprint down the court, run, jump, you look at Jeter going into the stands. I mean, we've been at recruiting events now. These kids, they struggle with diving, they struggle with sliding, and it's because, like Kev said, we'd go outside, we'd play for 3-4 hours. The ball's on the ground, it's 5 feet away, we're diving. So I think you don't want to lose that athleticism, and I think too many times with baseball, it becomes very elementary with kids. Like, all right, hey, I'm going to hit on the tee. Challenge your body. It's a fast twitch type sport. So I think those other sports, will at a young age help. And listen, I think there comes a time, like Kev's saying, all right, hey, I'm going to play Villanova baseball. Maybe I'm not going to play football my senior year and risk getting hurt. So I think, when you get to that point, it doesn't have to be a rush decision at 12.
Yeah, well said. And while you're hot, Maddie, I'll let you take those 2 questions away, buddy.
Yeah, Kev. Obviously, I had some superstitions being a pitcher. Was there any funny, weird, quirky superstitions or drills, that worked for you that you did, before or during a game?
No, I wasn't a superstitious guy at all. very laid back and loose. So I didn't have any of those things. A lot of guys do, though. It's very, very prevalent in our game. A lot of superstitious guys out there. I'm trying to think if I have any idea of funny ones from other guys that I had. The one that's just sticking out in my mind is the same shirt. A lot of guys would wear the same undershirt every time that they would pitch or every time that they would play. But no, I'm sorry. I'm coming up.
Uh-oh. We got to give him another question now, Maddie. We can't let him off the hook.
Yeah, no problem. What's something that you feel like people really don't understand about being a Division I head coach? Like, separate the baseball, what are some things that you feel like you do that people really don't know about, whether it be, giving advice to kids or being a mentor for your players? Like, what are some things outside of what people really see in Division I baseball, that you could talk about?
Well, I'm trying to think about my transition from when I went from an assistant coach to a head coach. Really, you become a firefighter. And what I mean by that is you're constantly pulled in directions of putting out a fire. Something went wrong here, something went wrong there. How are you going to fix that, right? And I think that the best coaches are guys that see it as an opportunity, right? If you're a good coach, you see an opportunity to help somebody put out that fire and get better, no matter what it is, right? If it's something in the classroom or something at home, or I'm not getting playing time, as long as you can look at that situation as an opportunity to help somebody and say, man, I'm so lucky to be, the leader and have these people need my help, rather than looking at it of, here we go again, what do I got to do to help? And I think that there's a lot of people in both of those separate buckets there. There's guys that look at it as an opportunity to help, and those are the good coaches. And the guys that say, oh, here we go, so-and-so, you're such a pain. What do I have to do again? Why do I got to talk to this person? So if you can be, on the right side of that and see everything as an opportunity, you can help a lot of people as a head coach. As a head coach, a lot of people think that it's all X's and O's and whether you're going to hit and run or bunt or steal or how you're going to manage the bullpen. To be honest with you, being a head coach at the Division I level and above is more about being a good communicator and building and maintaining relationships. That's the most important thing of your job, is being a great communicator, being organized, and making sure that you build proper relationships with everyone involved. Your players, your coaches, administration above you, the athletic directors, academic support, the trainer, the strength and conditioning staff, your donors, alumni, parents of the players. One thing that people probably don't think about is that as a head coach of a Division I sport, think about all the people that have access to you and all the people that you have to make sure are enjoying their experience when it comes to your program. Some of them I just named, right? Think about all the alumni. Every single person that played at Villanova baseball that's still living, they want to know what's going on with Villanova. They want to know that Villanova's in good hands. They want to know we're moving in the right direction. All the players and their parents, right? Parents want to make sure, like, hey, is my kid in a good situation here? Is he being treated fairly? Is he being treated right? Is he developing the right way? You have academic support staff that it's their job to make sure that all these athletes are passing their classes and getting good grades. So you have an academic support staff. They don't really care whether you're winning on the field. They don't really care how you're doing, what your batting average is or what your ERA is. They need to make sure you're going to class, you're studying, and you're getting good grades, because that's what their job is. And if you don't get a good GPA, and all of the sports at that school are not graduating on time with a good APR and getting a good GPA, that's how they're going to get judged, right? So you need to understand that there are all of these different facets, that have nothing to do with what goes on between the lines, that are just as important.
Yeah, and Kev, you just hit it on the head. I mean, that was, to my point. I think there's so much more than people understand. that goes into being a Division I head coach. I think it's really easy to see, hey, this guy was first team All Big East his senior year, but it's hard to see maybe freshman year you having an hour conversation with him about his weight or, his work ethic or something else. So you hit it on the head. I think these kids are going to fall off track. It's your job to kind of force them back on that track to make sure that, the overall picture, baseball aside, they're learning life lessons on the field. They're going to a Villanova and, not just because it's a great baseball program, because it's a great school. So I think there's so much more, that people don't really understand, that head coach has to deal with. So that was awesome, Kev. I appreciate that. And now the other question, I'm close with Eddie Brown, one of your assistants, a great guy, played with him in high school and in college as well. Anyone that knows Villanova knows that you guys have kind of been circling this year. This was a year where you're really going to see more of your recruiting class and everything that you've done. Did that make it even harder for you with the corona and everything that happened, since you jumped out to that 10-6 start and, really got to play with more of your recruits?
No, I mean, I'm a pretty positive guy. I try to see the good, in every situation. And for me, I think that we started to move in the right direction this year. All of the things that we wanted to happen, kind of fell in place and did happen. And I'm really looking forward to moving, in the right direction and continuing to do all the things that our guys have been doing. I'm really proud of all these guys that we've brought in and all the work that they've put in and all the dedication that they've put in. It's really fun to be a part of this. It really is. So I'm not down. I'm not upset. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody lost their year. It's not just Villanova baseball. Every single program lost their year. Unfortunately, there's some seniors that won't be able to come back, and my heart goes out to them. But I'm ready to move. I'm ready to move forward and get these guys back on campus, get them back on the field, and continue to help them along their journey. So is it a shame that we lost the season? Absolutely, it is. I would have loved for these guys to have an opportunity to fight for a spot in the Big East playoffs.
That's what, Kev. That's why I love you, man. I think, you're so even keel. Everything you've said has just been spot on, and I wish I was a player under your wing. Just that trust that you build and all that information. I don't think people realize how important that is to have that at the helm, of your program. Hey, this is my coach. This is his philosophies and his beliefs, and everything you said. It's just been awesome. And I just remember when I was coaching and I saw you for the first time at the showcase and we got to talk, and I was like, just a humble, cool guy. Someone who's accomplished so much. You never kind of made me feel inferior as a coach. You were always willing to pass on knowledge and just be a friend. And that's what I miss about the game, is just coaches like that, like yourself, that have always made time for other people. And that's the toughest part about it. And I tip my hat to you guys. I don't think people truly understand how much time you spend helping others. And it's so tough to balance that family time. And, all I can say is kudos to you and all those coaches out there, because you do a huge part in having a positive role in all these kids' lives. So, Matt, I don't know if you have anything else to say, but if not, Kev, we really appreciate you, taking the time.
I appreciate those kind words. That does mean a lot to me. Thank you.
Now, my big question, do you golf? Because we need to get on the golf course when it opens up.
Yeah, I love golf.
I know Eddie's a big golfer. Who's better?
Uh-oh.
I think we've gone back and forth a little bit. I've had my days and beat him, and I think he's had a few good days and he's beaten me. But luckily for us, usually we're playing against two other guys. So usually we're pairing ourselves up to play against other people, and we've been on the right side of those matches more often than we haven't.
I think that would make good television to have like foursomes of all the college coaches go up against each other. That would be really cool, actually.
Yeah, two on two golf. That is tremendous, especially when you got food and beverage involved and no worry in the world. Like right now would be the best time to do that.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. As long as it doesn't turn into like a Bob Barker, Happy Gilmore, where you're going to get it, Bobby, and you punch him down the hill. So Kev, we could talk all day, man. Again, we wish you nothing but success, and we definitely want to get together at some point when things start to clear up. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
you're the man. Enjoy the family time, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, Kev.